Benson's fixation on the dangers of schwagism wasn't incidental. Now his thoughts had turned to this once more. He squeezed his eyes as the memory he had struggled so hard to repress at last bubbled up from the deepest recesses of his subconscious. His wariness of schwagism began after an unfortunate encounter at a regional bluegrass festival when he was just 18 years old. A teetotaler himself, during the night of the concert, an itinerant vagabond thought it both comical and spiritually necessary to spike a young PhD scholar's cola with a substantial dose of liquid LSD. The last words Benson heard that night came from this vagabond. "You want to hit off of this?" he asked Benson, offering a filthy water bong that Benson figured might contain diphtheria along with whatever intoxicant. "No, thanks, dude," Benson muttered, his best effort at a nonchalance. "Oh," the man replied. "Man, this ain't nothing but swag. It won't hurt you none." This word, swag, stuck with him as he walked away. Unaware, the vagabond dosed him with LSD. The word swag resonated in his mind and became part of something larger, ephemeral. A drug, yes, but more. A philosophy, an ethos, and a portal into an alternate future universe. Benson, of course, tasted nothing, but not long after finishing his beverage, he found himself unable to operate his limbs, preferring instead to stagger, if not lope around, through the crowd assembled outdoors in a grassy field. In the distance, a six-piece acoustic troupe played. Among the many visions that came to him that night, none were so clear and long-lasting as his vision of what he had dubbed the ascendancy of swag. As the efforts of the LSD took hold, Benson pressed through the revelry until he eventually reached the margins of the natural amphitheater and the banks of a small creek. As he lay upon the gravelly sandbar, the stars glistening and undulating perilously close, his body affixed to the earth by what felt like an entirely tenuous pull of gravity. The stars eventually licked down upon him. A bolt of concentrated cosmic knowledge all at once streamed in from outer space and collided with his brain. At that moment, the young Edward Benson gazed into the future. In his vision, though it only lasted but a second, he saw the entire globe overrun with filthy, dirty swags. It was no longer just a fashion statement, as it had been in familiar instances of the past. His understanding of what defined swag was but a little fissure of what would one day be unleashed upon the entirety of civilization. This familiar crust punk hippie that dominated the bluegrass concert was but a mere prelude to a sinister phenomenon that was yet to come. In his vision, Benson saw droves of listless swags, a confluence of hippie and crust punk culture catalyzed with raw, pervasive poverty, an evil concoction indeed. They wore tattered, filthy black pants, clothing absolutely shredded in threadbare denim, canvas, patched occasionally with black leather, bits of metal pins, and rods holding the frayed material together. Silvery steel pins and rods dotted their bodies as well. Ears, eyebrows, noses, lips, everything pierceable was driven through with studs, ebony discs, and thick barbells. Their faces were invariably decorated with tribal tattoos of a Pacific Northwest flavor, hollow ovoids of black, dark green, and sometimes maroon. Their hair was invariably dreadlocked, or at least at some indeterminate stage of dreadlocking, bound with pasty beads carved of bone or antler. They did not treat others altruistically as one would expect from their common ancestor, the hippie. They were as vile, cutthroat brigands. What series of events had led to this future world, Benson could not determine, only that this was a very dark time for humanity, if not the final undoing of civilization altogether. Technology was absent. These people howled and danced in pagan, archaic ecstasy. They beat upon primitive instruments. Fires burned and crude weapons were forged from artifacts of a ruined past. Benson witnessed the post-apocalyptic crust-punk hippie hybrid, an archetype that dominated the globe, an amalgam of all cultures and races, but only the darkest aspects of those cultures and races. Their appearance, particularly their savage clothing, wasn't a fashion statement, but a genuine result of their lifestyle, which was less like the metal-studded punk look of those that preceded them and more stranded on a desert island for a decade like, as if a Hollywood effects artist had evenly rolled them in a careful mixture of sand, ash, and dung. And they covered the globe. Since that time, the vision remained a dark prophecy. Benson devoted himself to the prevention of such a fate, and now, for the first time, saw indication of its fulfillment within his pristine Supercenter. He tried showing up at the education department, but could barely articulate a few random pronouncements before his thoughts turned muddled and incoherent. Thus he spent his time isolated, conserving his mental integrity, compromised by delirium. Under the dim lights of artificial night in the Supercenter, they turned the lights down at night because they found out it's good for circadian rhythms. A pallor fell upon him, accompanied by insomnia. He tried exploring the Supercenter. He tried facing his ultimate nightmare head-on, to lose himself among the unassociates dancing in their reverie. Benson understood that unraveling the bizarre rituals, the seedy drum circles, the apoplectic dancing, all the vagaries of which the schwags were composed, was the most difficult task one could undertake. And furthermore, should he manage to penetrate the dynamics by which they resonated their sloth to the other associates, Pandora's box had nonetheless been opened. Closing it was hopeless. Once the lights dimmed that night, Benson crept from his stale compartment and strolled to a deserted electronics department, filled with empty chairs, dozens of plastic snap wrappers littering the floor. The distant corner of the Supercenter beckoned with the faint sound of empty laundry detergent tubs, repurposed as crude percussion instruments. Aisle 39, an odd development, but one well in the making, as those associates, bored and restless, were now prone to congregating around this aisle for reasons too primitive, too carnal, for Benson to ever fully understand. Nonetheless, he found himself pulled to its center. When the unassociates saw him creeping near, hearts leapt to throats. But united in their common purpose, spoons and spatulas banging on tubs, they found confidence. They watched him step awkwardly into their domain. Some remained seated cross-legged. Those that danced did not see him at all, eyes closed and bodies bobbing around in a psychic eddy, a whirlpool in an invisible circular sea. At last, one of them approached the Supercenter attendant. This one, not at all an unassociate, but former Siege Arena recruit Randall Cunningham, who had hours ago failed to qualify for passage to PepsiCon. Benson resisted the urge to reprimand him, to remind the young recruit he'd never matriculate if he insisted upon cavorting with these deadbeats, instead of honing his skills in the education department. No, Benson could not speak. Self-consciousness and anxiety gripped him as the memory of that traumatic bluegrass festival seized his mind. Perhaps Randall saw this, and perhaps acting out of sympathy, or perhaps wishing to allay his teacher's apparent terror, Randall extended a hand, a warm smile. His open palm held human commiseration in the form of a tiny eyedropper bottle filled with a concentrated solution of hallucinogenic indole. Benson examined the vial carefully. Bathed in the lurid glow of lava lamps and bald strings of blue Christmas lights, the whites of his eyes shone large and iridescent, matched by the yellow contents of the vial, equally bright and iridescent among the otherwise dark scene. The Supercenter attendant, the manager of education, the closed Supercenter transition liaison, second only to the general manager himself, Edward Benson, took the vial of tile melt like he were the proselytized communicant of some unhallowed and wicked ceremony. The harsh, acerbic taste snapped him from his trance, causing him to gasp while spontaneously vocalizing something that sounded like blur. The chemical intoxicant opened syntactical cages that, like the four-walled palace he ruled, had narrowed his perspective of the universe. A dreamlike cloud descended over him. Benson unpeeled the tweed coat from his body, folded it neatly over one arm, and found himself enveloped by a profound openness, which confounded his senses, causing him to stumble sideways and fall to the floor. The grid of tile flashed and scintillated, bent and smeared upwards on the shelves. Randall looked on as Benson struggled to his feet. The Supercenter attendant waved him away, and the recruit simply shrugged, pressed the earbuds of his all-pod back in, and resumed his bumbling dance. This idea appealed to Benson, and in the breast pocket of his coat, he found his own almond-colored all-pod player. Benson felt light and loose on his feet, like a marionette. His muscles weak, he found it difficult to sense the spatial orientation of his arms and legs. As a result of this loss of proprioception, he walked with a jagged, lumbering gait. He stumbled like a puppet strung with rubber bands as he untangled the earbud wires. He pressed the tiny white earbuds into his ears and pressed the play button. The music at once pulled the puppet strings taut. The track, part of a swing jazz collection, the Jonah Jones Quartet song "Where Is Your Heart" from a favorite film of his, Moulin Rouge, took hold of his body, pushing him on a set of rails. And there, under the dimmed light in the corner of the Supercenter, as the walls turned a crisscrossing pattern of flashing pinwheels, and the black security orbs dripped from the ceiling like great sticky blobs of glistening ink, Benson replayed this song over and over as he danced until the artificial dawn.